everyone. I'm Stephen Goldberg of Optimus Performance, bringing you practical tips and ideas on leadership, team development, and employee performance in the workplace. And as you can see, I have a special guest that I'm pleased to bring to the guest expert interview series that I've started on my YouTube channel. And it's Christi Scarrow. And I'll just gonna switch over to my screen where I have her LinkedIn profile. Welcome, Christi. Let me just start by that.
Thanks, Steve. I'm excited to be here.
And Christi is an author, keynote speaker, executive coach, and partner at Lighthouse 9 Group. And from her profile page, she says, I help leaders, teams, and organizations make decisions that count. I'm striving to create a world based on truth, where we can have respectful dialogue, engage in difficult conversations, and build connection between us. And that's something that is incredibly needed, I could say, in this world from my experience. We do need to speak the truth, live the truth. Otherwise, we get caught up in lies. It can be very stressful because you got to, once you start lying, you got to keep lying, right? Because you have to keep covering up what you lied about. So it becomes very stressful and creates a lot of drama. It's great for crime stories on television, but it's not good for real life and real connections. So Christi is, tell us or the listeners about what you focus on. And you told me that it revolves around obviously leadership development, but through the skill of decision making, of understanding the decision making style of the leader and how to modify that to improve their communication and leadership. So tell me in your words what exactly it is that you do at Truth Warriors. And about your book, I guess, too.
Yeah, thanks. So the book Truth Warriors came about because, as you said, it was sort of like that bigger world problem of how do we build better connections, and what gets in the way of making better decisions is one. The reason I talk about truth, because it's about, we all have truth to our experience. And it's really important as a leader to recognize that the truth of others is different. And in decision making, considering other perspectives is really important, but also feeling confident enough in your voice to be able to speak your truth. So it's kind of about finding that balance between being a good listener, being an active listener, considering perspectives, and having confidence in your own positioning. And I think as a leader, that's always a fine balance, and we have to think about it. And so as you said, Steve, for me, it was really important to start from the foundation of understanding yourself as a leader, because we all have these natural preferences, and decision making is quite complex. I mean, we have different situations where it's easier to make decisions than others, but I do believe we have natural preferences. And so the book and the assessment that I've created that the book revolves around is this idea of understanding, am I the kind of person that's more rational? Do I need a lot of data to figure out decisions? Does that sometimes slow me down? Am I the kind of person that just goes with my gut and maybe doesn't validate my thinking and my decisions? And I take that as one area of decision making. And the other is what I call sort of being on the conflict spectrum. Are you the kind of person that can really, lean into difficult conversations, but maybe sometimes are too pushy with your own opinion? And on the other side of that, maybe you avoid difficult conversations, but your voice isn't getting heard. And the assessment I created and the strategies that I work with leaders on is how to figure out maybe where you sit on that spectrum at a point in time. And then thinking about, okay, the people you work with, where do they sit? So if you're a really high rational person, needs a lot of data, somebody who comes in on their gut might, be a benefit in some ways because maybe they can move you forward, but also they're maybe taking unnecessary risks. So thinking about the people around you and how they make decisions and thinking about your own style, I think what strengthens your ability to lead your team and be effective in the way you're driving the business.
This really speaks to me because I'm working on, as part of our leadership and team development training, we use an exercise in knowing yourself And a lot of the words that you're using, like about are you more rational or instinctive, or, how do you make decisions driven by your inborn style is what we also help leaders and employees discover about themselves in that exercise. And it's about your, the three different intelligences that we have: the head, the heart, or the emotion, and the gut, instinctive. So we're kind of talking the same language, just a different approach. But I like it because whatever one can do to know themselves better, whatever tools they can use, whether it's an assessment or an exercise like we do, I think it's just adds to your knowledge of yourself, which becomes a strength and an asset. And that makes you become a better leader and in a better position to interact with people, whether it be in business or just personally. So,
yeah, and as you know, it's important to recognize how you move within it, because situational leadership dictates that, yeah, I might have this natural preference, but the people I'm managing and working with may not. So for me, it is about finding that balance. And if you don't know your own, maybe triggers or barriers or ways of thinking, it doesn't allow you to open up to think that somebody else might think very differently. And what feels like maybe a stress point between you and your team members might actually be something you can leverage, and rather than feeling like they're slowing you down, maybe you go, okay, you know what, they're my pause button. They're the person that's going to go validate and fact check that my gut is telling me this. So I really think that's important in leadership.
Yeah. No, and respecting that people that are different from you, they're not wrong. They're right. They're living their own truth. That's who they are. And probably that you could benefit from that as a leader by appreciating what they bring, that strength that they bring that may be so opposite from you that it's hard for you to accept, but that there's a way, like you say, you can leverage that to balance yourself, because we need to strike a balance in our organization in terms of how we exercise action and do things. And different people bring those different strengths to create that balance. So let me ask you, let's say, and you got me really interested now, because I didn't really understand before this conversation that there was a tool that you offered, this assessment, and that people can go and take it. You say you make it available for free?
Yeah, it's for free. If you're looking for it, it's at truthwarriors.ca/assessment. And then if you go on, it's got some questions that force you to make trade-offs between different decisions about what you might think. And then from there, I actually provide you with a report that'll tell you where your style is and some strengths and some opportunities, and then opportunity actually to have a debrief session afterwards. Because I think what's always important in an assessment is, what am I reflecting on this? What resonated with me? Because I do recognize human beings can't be put in boxes. And although the assessment puts you in a bit of a box, I think what's really important from it is more the insights from it. Like, what did this tell me about myself? And people start to think about, well, you know what? I have a feeling like my team member is totally opposite to me here. And those are the important dialogues. So I offer both the report for free and a 30-minute debrief with myself to say, what did you learn from this? And what can be some of the actions you put into place?
Well, I'm going to personally take you up on that because I love this. And I'll put a link in the description of the video to that tool or that assessment so people can go and get that. And if they'd like, schedule, I guess, that conversation with you. But I definitely would like to do that with you. And maybe we could even record it and post that as another video. That could
it'd be interesting.
Put myself
draw into your psyche.
And it'll be interesting to see my perception of myself and what I learned through the assessment, and if I agree with it or not. And that it could be a very interesting exercise we could do together and record. So. I think one of the most challenging things for leaders is even when you learn about yourself, I see it in the exercise of knowing yourself that we do with people. And I also work with my clients. I have them use a psychometric assessment that I didn't create, but that's from the Wiley Group that I'm a strategic business partner with them at the PXT Select. And even with that and the tool that I use, I see that leaders, even when they become more self-aware, it's hard for them to shift their style because, like you said, it's inborn. So how do you help, or how do you get a leader to make a shift, to become more balanced, as you say, in their way of making decisions and, leading people?
Yeah, and that, as you know, that's the hard part. So it's saying, okay, now I recognize a little bit where maybe I'm struggling and where maybe my team members are thinking differently. When we have our debrief session, and obviously it's a bit more challenging than just in 30 minutes we're going to solve it, but we start to talk about what are those immediate things that you can put into place, or what barriers now does it uncover for you? So when you think about team decision making, oftentimes when people reach out to me for support in decision making, it's because it feels like either things are moving too slowly, they feel like their team members, they're fighting up against them, or they feel like, I'm not even confident that we're making the right decisions. I don't know where to go. I'm feeling overwhelmed. And by doing the assessment and reflecting on, that's because I'm spending too much time. So what's interesting for me is I can really focus the conversation depending on the style. So I've dealt with the folks that are saying like, yeah, I'm always told I take too long to make decisions. Okay, so let's talk about what's behind that, right? Is it actually behind the fact that you're afraid to make a mistake? Is it, I just feel like, I want to get more information? Is it, and sometimes it's about them making a mistake, and sometimes I'm like, what's in making a mistake? What is the impact on that? And we can deal a little bit into it. And I think just by uncovering those barriers and trying to, sometimes it's about, knowing that this is a barrier for me, and deciding the couple of actions I can take, what I like to call micro bravery, right? To get past whatever it is that's holding you back. Or a lot of times I'm finding if it's around team decisions, it's systematizing it. It's thinking about, actually our team is really harmonious, but nobody ever challenges us. And I'm not confident that we're making good decisions because of that. So let's actually bring in the third party who has no idea what we're doing to give us some ideas about this decision. So putting actual systems in place that allow you to challenge it, asking the questions in your room. Do we have the right people in this room for the decision? Have we considered other perspectives? A lot of times when we're trying to make decisions, we ask for advice because we're validating opinions, right? We're not actually looking for other alternatives. I know I'm a culprit of this. And so how do you make sure that when I'm coming to you and saying, do you think this is the right decision? I'm not actually looking for you just to say, yes, it is, right? I'm actually looking for validation or other alternatives. And so the language you can use might actually be, I'm not going to share my ideas. I want to hear yours first. And then if I hear yours first, I might actually be more open to not validating my own opinions. So different strategies like that, depending on where your struggles are. Because I think as you said, it comes down to the actions you can put into place and thinking about those specific ways in which you can start to overcome those barriers.
Yeah, so that brings up, that's great information, brings up a lot of thoughts in terms of, one of them is about, you mentioned, perhaps somebody's taking too long to make a decision because they're afraid of making a mistake, or not having enough information is another aspect of that I can see. And so really fear comes into play a lot in decision making. And it could be somebody who makes decisions too quickly, maybe does that because they're afraid that if they take too long, things won't move forward quick enough, right? That could be the other side of it, where somebody's afraid to make a mistake, and so they just go over it again and gather too much information. So how do people deal with that fear? I guess the first step in change is awareness, right? You have to be aware to then make a choice to change. So how do you go from, let's say, the thing that's holding you back to the actual shift in behavior?
Yeah, And as you know, it's always about like peeling back the onion of that fear. Because even if you say, okay, and I did a coaching session recently where the person was being told she didn't make decisions fast enough. And that she kept using the words, whenever she would explain it, she's like, I have to do my due diligence. That's why. And I said, well, what does that mean? Due diligence for what purpose? And who is expecting this due diligence? And she kind of came to realize, I think I'm putting it on myself. I feel like I think people will believe I'm not prepared if I haven't come with all this information. And I was like, well, what people? And like, if you ask them, what do you need from me, or is this enough information? Would that be better? So it's always peeling back, because it starts, we don't even recognize a lot of times our own fear, which is why coaching is so important, because it pulls out of people what they don't necessarily even hear themselves, right? So if she's saying to me, I got to do due diligence, I'm like, what does that even mean? And who is that for? And what does that look like? And how does that show up? And then what would happen if you didn't? And another thing I challenged her on, for example, is she said, like, I don't trust my intuition. Like, she said, I have a lot of intuition, but I ignore it. And I said, well, what if, she was very fact-based. I said, what if your intuition was actually a data fact that you considered? And then you actually started from that point and validated that instead of ignoring it. And that then went, yeah, I guess I could do that. So I think it's always about pulling back that onion from, what is really behind it, because it will be very individual. And I think coaching is a great way to do that. I offer coaching for that purpose. And then, because you can train a lot of decision models in terms of rational, the pros and cons list. That's a very simple way, but there's lots of different ways you can obviously offer risk assessments and decision making. But I feel it does come much more down to those emotional barriers and those fears, as you said, that holds us back. So
I agree with you. I like that what you said as well before about putting in place systems to making decisions, so you do get that shift. Like having somebody, I guess, like I was thinking, play the devil's advocate. Like when it comes to saying, is everybody in agreement? Well, if you have somebody to ask the question, well, have we considered all possibilities or whatever, to make sure that you're not just making a decision to go along with the leader's point of view and not challenging him because you're afraid of conflict or whatever. So I think that was a very good, important point, that in your process, in your training, you do teach, I guess, systems that leaders and companies can put in place to shift the way they're making decisions.
Yeah, and there's a big part of my book, which starts at kind of the middle of the book. It actually talks about beliefs in general, because beliefs are really what affects our way of thinking and our perceptions, and considering the biases. And then it talks about the model of how those biases affect us individually. And then probably half the book is really about those kind of strategies. And that those are definitely examples, the devil's advocate, or you have talked about this sort of ideas cage match, where you're specifically taking two very opposing views and each one supports it. Or you do what I call a pre-mortem. So, normally we look at a decision and go, was it good? Was it bad? And sometimes we are swayed by the fact that if the decision turned out good, well, then it was good. But in fact, we may have just gotten lucky and we didn't have a very good process. So if we do a pre-mortem, it's more like, okay, what could actually happen out of this? And then we step back and go, okay, if that does, what are some of the mitigating risks? You've thought it through almost before you've made it. And then there are different ways that you can think of different strategies to make sure that as you're building out team decisions, you are putting the right things in place to consider the options. And of course, it depends on how complex it is, because the more involved, I do a lot of work with change management. And of course, that's all very much about how do you bring people into the decision-making as early on as possible? How do you engage them? How do you help them to define where you're going in the path? And that also is a big part of it.
Yeah, and I was going to bring that up because involving your employees, I mean, I talk a lot about that in my articles and videos, revolving around teamwork. And in order to create teamwork in your company, you need to adapt your leadership style to become what we call a participative leadership style. To adapt a participative leadership style, whenever you can, and especially for important decisions that are going to affect people, and that people have to actually make changes in the way they do things to support that decision. You want to involve them in that decision process. So maybe just talk a little bit about that. And I guess, I go back to the assessment. Certain leaders are able to easier adapt a participative leadership style than others. How does that get revealed through your assessment?
I don't know if you're fully able to understand that. I think the difference is when you think about the reason conflict for me, I know conflict typically has a negative connotation, but I actually see conflict on that spectrum as well, which is you can be super aggressive, right, when you're in a meeting. And that means, you're the loudest person in the room, your opinion, and you may not consider other perspectives. And you could be super timid and you can actually be avoidant, and maybe you're having side conversations. So it shows up in that sense because the participatory leader knows kind of when to move back and forth, right? And every leader, interesting enough, because I interviewed a number of CEOs and such going into this book, and all of them said one of the things that they did was actually primarily shift their natural style as they become leaders. So it was never about like, I'm a rational person. Like the one man I spoke to owns his own company, he's an engineer. He's like, I would have totally been all data focused, I can come up with the answers really easy. He's got 2 degrees in engineering. And he's like, but for me, I've actually had to let go of understanding more data. And I have to walk into a room and tell everybody that I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I don't have the answers. You guys have the answers. And he lays the foundation because he knows that if he walks in there and a lot of times he's like, I do have the answer, to be totally honest. I probably know it because I can figure it out. But I don't want to be blinded by that perception myself. I want to be open to other ideas, and I want them to be able to contribute because I know that's what's going to get buy-in to this decision. So I think it is about that movement. So the assessment will sort of highlight whether you are very assertive, which means you probably do need to consider other perspectives a little bit more. And so back to always like, what's your challenge, what's your style? You can start from a place of going, oh, I didn't realize I was quite as assertive as it's suggesting. Maybe I am missing things. I think that's probably a bit harder for leaders who are in that space to recognize that.
Well, there's correlation between being participative, having a participative leadership style, and being more a democratic person rather than an autocratic, right? More diplomatic versus autocratic. So, people that have it's often referred to as an A-type personality, aggressive, controlling, they tend to be more autocratic leaders. And those that have more of a balance tend to be less autocratic and can adapt a participative leadership style more easily. But it's really crucial for, like you said, change management, building teamwork, building employee engagement, building trust, that the leader involves people in decision making, especially for those decisions that have the outcome has a big impact on how people perform their jobs.
Yeah.
So I'll put a link as well to your book. So there'll be 2 links, your website, your book, and where they can, the assessment is through your website. Now, there's also an event that's coming up that you're hosting or you're creating for leaders. And it's beyond just what you offer. It involves other professionals. Tell us about this event that's coming up soon.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. So it's happening on August 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th. The guests that register for it will basically have the opportunity for giveaways that they can go on to the site and download. So there's minimal requirement. You don't have to go on, at 10 a.m. and make sure you're there for the actual video presentation. But my intention was in supporting leaders is bringing across experts across the world. So it's pretty exciting because we do I'm pretty sure we're covering all continents at this point with 20 or so leaders who each have something to offer as a downloadable gift that is going to be very valuable for leaders. And obviously, Steve, you're participating as well, which is going to be great. And, they'll be able to access mini courses, PDFs, coaching, different support mechanisms that will enable them to be better leaders ultimately. So, it's crossing many different areas of mindset and productivity and team development, and just really different ways, I think, really important ways that leaders can think about building up that skill, because it's an ongoing journey. I know the best leaders I know continually invest in being a better leader. So my goal of the event is to really equip them with a number of different tools that they can access that will hopefully be of help.
Great. Yeah, I know the tool that I'm offering it's a online training on how to hire the right person for the job. So that's a key decision that, I think it's the foundation of performance and productivity. And I've seen it so often when people hire based on skills, but there's other components to hiring the right person that is not often considered. And so how you hire and who you hire really forms the foundation of building performance and productivity, and also freeing yourself as a leader to work on what you need to do. Because if you hire the wrong person, then you're stuck having to fix problems from that person, follow up with them too much supervision, and you're not getting the performance and productivity you need. So you can't. And that's why I guess, the best companies in the world invest a lot in, hiring, developing, paying, keeping the best talent that they can find. And, obviously smaller companies have a hard time doing that, but it's a really key decision point. And so I hope that will be a valuable tool that people will want to check out. So, I'll put a link to where people can register for this event. And you said it's a free event?
It's absolutely free. Yeah, registration will start July 26th, and then the event itself will happen in August. So there's nothing required financially to be a part of it. So.
Okay, very good. And what parting thoughts do you want to share that we didn't cover around the event or about decision making, your book? Anything you'd like to leave us with?
No, the only thing to add probably, Steve, is just again with your giveaway. I do think, as you said, that the key is to be able to hire the right people, and I think sometimes the struggles for leaders are even in the delegating and being really crystal clear about what that looks like and what they can let go of. Especially, I think, in the entrepreneurial small business space where you're still growing, or even newer emerging leaders who have a team but don't quite yet know how to balance. I always find, when I wrote my book, it was really kind of almost to my younger self navigating that complexity of like, how do I make the people who work for me happy? And how do I make the people who I work for happy? And how do I find that balance? And how do I let go of the stuff that I know I can do, but I got to empower others to do it? So I think what you have as an offer, just to making sure that, as you said, foundationally, you're really making sure you're bringing in the right people, that sets you up for success in that area as well. Because I do see that a big challenge for leaders is finding that span of control and letting go of that control. And as we talked about those autocratic leaders, I find they might be faster in moving stuff, but the problems usually bite them in the butt later. So it comes back to you if you don't involve people up front. It feels like less work initially because you're just telling people what to do, ends up being more cleanup later. So for leaders who hire the right people and empower people properly, I think it helps to avoid those challenges.
There's that old expression, hire slow, fire fast.
Yes.
We're right now in the, beginning of July. And so the registration is opening up soon for your event. But also, we're the economies are reopening from the pandemic. hopefully that'll continue on the upward curve. And I just heard some news, and we're both in Canada, and one of the banks, I think it was RBC or the Bank of Canada, I forget which one, they were predicting that the economic growth in Canada would be 6% or more for the last portion of the year, I guess the last quarter, as the economy continues to reopen and rebound. And, you know, a lot of business owners that were interviewed or surveyed for that expressed a lot of positivity about their opportunities and that they plan to hire more people. So I know it's been hard to hire people over the last few months. And I have clients that were hiring and couldn't find people. There was one in the construction area, couldn't find people. And I think it's even going to get worse. So companies tend to hire whoever they can, but sometimes that's a big mistake. And so you need to work on making good decisions about your strategy to attract good employees and how to hire them as well. And so that's a key decision that companies need to make. And I think that attending your event, there'll be a wealth of information that people can learn to help them, I guess, just navigate the growth opportunities that are coming as the economy start to rebound.
Yeah.
So again, there'll be links to the event and to Christi's tools that she's offering for free. I'll put that in the description of the video. Thank you, Christi, very much for joining me today. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so and click the bell to turn on notifications so you get news of new videos. Check out some of the other guest interviews on the channel. There's a playlist I created for that. There's also tools and worksheets that you could download for free from me. One of them is a T decision worksheet. Very simple way to make decision. You know, when you're having trouble, there's also a goal planning worksheet, job description form. So you could all check that out. There's links in the description of this video. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thanks again, Christi, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.